good afternoon, good evening all, it's Bear here. And I'd like to welcome you to my YouTube channel, A Box with No Lid. A channel I'm creating not just to bring awareness around the realities of complex trauma, but I'm really trying to get into the understandings of its inner workings to support you guys in ways of healing so that you can make the differences in your lives that you so rightly deserve. Now, this is the next video in the adoption series. And the next couple of videos, these ones are going to be button pushy, not in the triggering sense, but in the annoyance or the confrontational sense. And I want you guys to understand that this is a nuance of the fog. This is a nuance of attachment that, in my personal experience, the majority of adoptees and those in long-term placement from foster care, we don't like to think about it because it shows us and reminds us that we're different. And I know it trips us up and it bothers us. And when I try to raise this within certain adoption circles, it doesn't get a very good response because of that. But it is such an important understanding to have if we actually want to heal from the fog, if we actually want to heal our attachment trauma. And that is understanding the difference between a biological attachment and a cognitive one. As I said in pretty much all the adoption videos, adoption attachment and long-term foster care attachment, our attachment is a trauma script. It's from a trauma base. It is an attachment trauma base. It is a survival script. No matter how close we feel to our adoptive family or our long-time caregivers, how our body has physically connected, how our nervous system is physically connected, is fundamentally different. Because biology plays such a huge part in connection. Because the people we were connecting to initially, those that are supposed to be our closest and most intimate family, are not biologically ours. They're not the same biology. They're different genetics. There are fundamental differences. And majority of this stuff, it comes around epigenetics, it comes around polyvagal theory and vocal tone responses, it comes around our neurophysiological and neurochemical responses, around all the interactions we have and how we connect is different. And there's missing pieces because of that lack of biological connection. And those missing pieces are where the problems arise when we, as adolescents or adults, when our interactions with people become more complicated. This is where these problems arise, and they rear their head and they shape our relationships, they shape our connections. And in a lot of cases, unfortunately, they're the reasons why our relationships don't work. Hence the importance of bringing this into the mix, of bringing this up to the surface. And like it says in the title, the difference between a biological connection or biological attachment and a cognitive one. When we come from an adoption base, when we come from a foster care base, our attachments are cognitive. We as young children, infants to young children, we need to learn how do we fit into this family that somebody has picked us up and placed us with. We don't have similarities. They look different to us. Their mannerisms are different. Their emotional responses and triggers need to be assessed and learned. We need to know what they like, what they expect. There's a million questions that an infant or a young child has to answer to be part of. And because this happens to young children, our cognitive understanding and our depth of life experience, we answer these questions very broadly, very generally, and this is where the gaps occur. Now, where I see this happen all the time with adoptees and foster care is if we know what is needed in a response or an interaction, we're cool with it. But the moment that interaction changes to something we don't, we pause. We are actively trying to find what we are supposed to do. In most cases, we can't respond, so we don't. Or that pause is seen like we are not engaging, or we're not present, or we don't approve. And the people we engage with completely misunderstand what is happening and what is going on within us. That often leads to a negative outcome or a far stronger response than it really is needed. And this is where the problems arise in close friendships and relationships, is things get taken out of context. The understanding isn't there that we are trying to find the right response from a list of instructions that we've learned and developed without a large component of that information even being present, because we've never developed biological connections. We don't have those emotional investments. Those gaps are not filled. And this is where the problem lies. And what I see over time is there's just this gray area of the adoptee is always perceived as aloof or distant. Or if the adoptee or foster care, if we're pushed, we have a far stronger response. So they either don't push us, or we get accused of being aggressive, or of being many, many things that is not what we're actually trying to be. When all we're trying to do is to learn how to be part of. The button pushy part of this is we need to admit that we do this. We need to admit that how we connected is different. It's not our fault. We did nothing to deserve the situation that we were put in that required us to develop this. But we need to acknowledge within ourselves that it's not that we're wrong either. We're not wrong. We learned at the capacity we had to learn. And if you expect a 6-month-old to a 10-year-old to even have any possibility of thinking of all the nuances of the complexities of adult relationships, you're a nutcase. So having that level of expectation on a person coming from that background to have all these nuances inherently there, it is not going to happen. In our society, the authorities that push for adoption, that push for long-term foster care placements without this awareness around it, and have done for decades, centuries. This is what I mean by they're not cases, because they expect these attachments to grow without a biological connection or without adequate awareness that these measures need to be met in a non-biological way. They need to be developed. There's this assumption that children are a blank slate and they will just attach and all these markers will come into play. And they don't. They can be artificially stimulated and engaged in ways that are negative. And you'll see more stronger attachment bases with some people coming from foster care and adoptions. You'll see, they'll go from relationship to relationship to relationship. They require a relational intensity beyond the capacity of most relationships to survive. There's all these disproportionate responses in trying to work it out, trying to learn how to. The most common response is one I'm guilty of, and why I know a lot of other adoptees that I engage with regularly. We're constantly trying to understand how to improve and work with things, but externally others are perceiving us as aloof, as different, or we look straight through people, or we don't value them, or we're aggressive, or all these negative responses, which we're not actually doing. We're trying to actively learn how to better engage and how to be part of, but we're not given the grace. And our responses are perceived negatively. Therefore, it reinforces our attachment to them. It reinforces, well, I have to justify what I'm doing because I came from this base. And I see that happen all the time. And it gets to the point where we refuse to justify it. We just walk away. or we just shut down, or we give a more aggressive response. And in society, they go, well, see, this is why people from foster care and adoption, there's something wrong with them. It's not. There's nothing wrong with us. We needed the grace, understanding, and support to learn and to develop from a base that had pieces missing. We cannot be expected to understand what those pieces mean and represent because they're missing. And this is the understanding I want to convey in this video, is we've done nothing wrong, but we have pieces missing in our attachment. And those pieces require our acknowledgement, and they require us to skill up and learn. And to learn, we need to be given the grace and the support to be able to. In the next video, I'll go into a little bit more detail in some of the more inner workings of this. But for now, as button pushy as it is, understanding that our attachment has gaps. How we interact has gaps. We're not wrong, it's not our fault. But we need to acknowledge that there is those gaps. And when we first start to acknowledge it and sit with it, we can start to be willing to learn how to, with the right people in the right way, in the right circumstances. As always, I love you guys' comments and feedback. Please be mindful, please be safe. Please, be aware and value yourself. We haven't done anything wrong, but we do need to learn to heal and work with this stuff. As always, I love you guys' comments and feedback, and I'll see you all next time.